So I want to take us up till today, and you gave us a preview Easter Sunday. Bring us up to date.
Sure. So about in 2015, so about 7 years ago, those books that I had written out of my experience with Fellowship Bible Church community, those books I gave away freely to a Ukrainian seminary to translate into Russian. That's what they did. They translated them into Russian, and they began to sell them. In fact, Randy, I remember the day that there was a man standing in our foyer, and it was the first time I really realized what had happened. I just said, hey, take them, do what you want with them. I can't read Russian, so they'd send me back the PDFs, but I'd say, okay, cool, that's what Phil looks like in Russian. Okay, so that's all I knew, right? But on one Sunday, there was a man standing in the back congregation. He was Ukrainian. And he says to me, through his wife, who's a translator, he says to me, listen, I don't speak your language, but I use your books in Ukraine. And we began to kind of unpack, wait, how do you use the stop sign? Your stop sign isn't even an octagon, is what I said to him. And he said, oh no, we use it. We got it posted up in people's houses over there. It's like, so all of this stuff that I discovered with you suddenly had crossed a language barrier. And I remember that day I thought, man, Lord, what are you actually going to do? So when the war happened, because that copyright was free to Ukraine, a German ministry partner picked up the book Safe in the Storm, the little book on anxiety with a lighthouse on the front of it, and printed 5,000 copies and sent them into Ukraine. And my friend Greg interacted with me again to say, listen, this is the tool that we are using to counsel people in war trauma. You say, well, is it a war trauma book? No, it's just an anxiety book. But you need to understand that in the rest of the world, there is so little in their language that if you put one book out there, it's what they have. And so we said, what can we do? So with the nonprofit side of Biblical Strategies, we said, let's try to get 25,000 copies of that book to refugees in Poland. And this part of the story, I'm not making it up, but it's why I talk a lot about providence now, because I can see it more. That was going to be $25,000. We knew the cost of that. We knew what it would be. We arranged with the printer through the German counterpart. And what happens is a week later, I haven't even talked about it, hardly with anybody. A week later, a man calls me, and he says to me, I overheard you talking about the books. What do you need? I said, 25,000 books, it's $25,000. He said, is that exactly what it is? I said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. He said, I need you to sit down so you can hear my story. He said, a number of years ago, I got involved in a bad business deal, and that bad business deal, I lost a lot of money. And he said, the man has no legal obligation to me, but he wrote me a month ago, and he said to me, I need to apologize for what I've done. I'm sorry for what happened. I'm sorry for how it went down. I've known I need to make it right for you. I can't make it right all at once, but please accept this as a token of what I'm about to give. And he said, Phil, I'm looking at a check for $25,000. And he said, I've been praying for a week what I'm supposed to do with this, and you tell me you need $25,000? He said, I know what I'm supposed to do with it. Right? And so a week later, the check comes to Advancing Biblical Strategies, and the books start to get printed. The anxiety book starts to get printed there. And what happens in the interim is John and Dacia Abramovich are here as missionaries from Poland, and they say to me, hey, listen, real quickly, there's a warehouse in Warsaw, Poland that has 5,000 women and children. And so I go for a run on April 5th, and I'm not worried about the one book because it's already paid for. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I've helped the adults, but I haven't done anything for the kids. And literally, I started to weep as I'm running. I get emotional, and I tell the Lord, Lord, here am I. I've never done a children's book. I don't even know how to do a children's book. But if you would have me do something, I'll try. And here's the lesson here. Don't tell God that and expect him not to act, okay? Because literally, by the time I was done with the run, I had the seeds of a story in my head, and I did two things. I came home and I told my wife, I said, Kim, this is gonna sound really weird. I'm supposed to write a children's story for Ukraine. I don't even know how. And I called an artist who I've used, Michaela, who I've used on very last minute projects. That was the qualifier.
Let me jump over to Michaela. Michaela, what were you thinking when, once again, Pastor Phil reached out to you at the last minute to do something?
Well, I was thinking a lot of things all at once. So I was in my car, and I was setting up an audiobook for my drive home, and I see a call from Pastor Phil, and I'm like, am I doing anything for the next 48 hours? Because that's usually my turnaround time. So I answer the phone, and he tells me this whole story. And
I once said Michaela built the stone that was going to be rolled away from the tomb in 48 hours. Okay, so this has history. This relationship, working relationship has history. Go ahead.
It was pretty accurate. So he told me the whole story, and I was like, yes, absolutely. There was no question about it. I knew that that was something that I wanted to be a part of, to serve for.
Awesome. All right, well, Phil, why don't you share where we are in this particular
Sure,
story?
so just understand something, that God, in my opinion, did the miraculous. This wasn't a story until April 5th. It was nowhere to be seen on the horizon. We requested 25,000 copies of a children's story to match the adult book, without a story being written, without an illustrator, without the translator, without the layout individual, without children's editors. We said, okay, we think God wants us to do this. And I asked you on April 17th to pray. That's only 21 days ago. Okay? So just put it in context. This is a 50-page story. I'm just going to give you a bit of it so you can understand how the story flows, right? And it's impossible, really, for me to... I've asked you for last-minute projects, but I never asked you for one that lasted 30 days, Michaela. So I would get text from Michaela at 3:20 a.m. where she would send me the picture. Okay? Across this whole gamut, you have people who have been a part of Fellowship Bible Church, from children's editors to layout individuals who have volunteered their effort, to even the translator. None of us make anything from this, just the opportunity to serve Ukrainian refugee children. So this is the story. You don't get all 50 pages, you get the Cliff Notes version this morning, okay? So here it is. Safe in the Storm is a story about two Ukrainian children. Nikolai, who's a 13-year-old boy, and a 7-year-old sister, whose name is Natasha. They live in Odessa on the Black Sea, southern Ukraine, and their mom and dad send them to Georgia. They send them to Georgia to see their grandparents. That's not unusual for that part of the world, and so they put them on a ship, and they're waving goodbye to them because they only had enough money for 2 tickets. They enjoy the ride immensely, and here you can see them eating English muffins with dry cottage cheese in them. That's what Ukrainian children eat for breakfast, and so that's what they're doing, except you'll notice that the sky is red behind them, and that is because the captain is singing, "Red in the morning, sailors take warning, red at night is a sailor's delight." And Nikolai says to his sister, that's because a storm is coming. And they return to the bottom of the ship, but Natasha gets scared in the middle of the night. She's looking for a little kitten she has found, and so she ends up on the deck, and the storm washes her overboard. And her brother grabs a life preserver and jumps in to save her. But the boat is going away. Okay, now just for a moment, put yourself in the position of a Ukrainian refugee child. Okay? No mom and dad, all alone. I don't pretend to imagine what they've been through in a war, but I can pretend to imagine what they would feel like here. And they start to swim because they see a light. They think it's a ship, but really it's a lighthouse on Snake Island off the Bulgarian coast in the Black Sea. It's there. You could see it if you Google it. And once they get to the lighthouse, they are saved by the lighthouse keeper, a man by the name of Constantine. Incidentally, Constantine is the name of the pastor that I met in the foyer, 6 years ago or something. It's an expression. It was my way of saying, listen, God could take this message someplace else and use it. And they asked Constantine the question everybody in suffering asks. Like the Bible says, I should cast all my anxiety upon the Lord because he cares for me. How do I know God really cares? Okay. And Constantine says, well, to tell you how God really cares, I need to take you back to the beginning. He says, in the beginning, there was a creator God who created man and everything was perfect. But man disobeyed him. And when man disobeyed him, man not only was separated from God, but he began to hurt other men and women. But God had a plan. God sent Jesus, the great rescuer, who would come and reach out for these people. But this great rescuer came, and people didn't like him very much. In fact, Constantine says to the children, even Jesus was a refugee with his parents down to Egypt when he was just a little boy. And the people didn't care for his perfection, and so ultimately they crucified him on a cross, and that served to provide our rescue. And God proved his plan worked by resurrecting Jesus from the grave 3 days later. And that night, Nikolai and Natasha say, we want to believe in the great rescuer. Now, this is the Cliff Notes version, so you miss all the cool little fun stuff about a brother pulling pranks on his sister. You'd have to get the book to do that, but it's not going to be in English. It's only going to be in Russian and Ukrainian, so you'll have to get somebody to translate it for you, okay? And in the end, they are wonderfully restored to their parents. And when the parents say to the children, you were so courageous, you did this all alone, Nikolai says to his mom and dad, oh, we weren't alone. And the mother says, what do you mean you weren't alone? Who was with you? And Nikolai says, well, to tell you that, I'd have to take you back to the beginning, okay? And that's the story. So
Michaela, from an illustrator's perspective, I mean, you had to put together a lot of pictures in a very short amount of time. What were you trying to do? What was the process?
So the first image that I had to create, I guess, was the cover. Pastor Phil asked for that first so that he could push that out towards the people who would be praying for our efforts. And he wanted it to have like the lighthouse, and we had discussed stylized, like different styles of what he would want for the book. So we worked together and we found a children's book that had an inviting cover, and that's kind of what I inspired the coloring in the background by. He really stressed that he didn't want it to be like too dark, especially since these children are coming from, war. So we played around with the colors, and we found a lighthouse from the Ukraine, right? And I just wanted it to be like a warm, This one I really like because, well, Pastor Phil has a little cameo.
I did not know I had a cameo appearance in the book, okay? It took somebody reading the book to say, I love your cameo, and I said, I'm not in that book. And then I looked at the picture and said, maybe I am in the book. And I said to Michaela later, like, please tell me you didn't do that intentionally, did you?
Not at first. But he had been sending me the text so that I could pull from it what I thought would be appropriate to communicate the story through the images. And so he wrote the name Constantine, an older gentleman, and I was like, okay, how old is an older gentleman? Like, what does he want here? And I'm like, does he want like white hair? Does he want like So I was doing a lot of brown-haired people, and I'm like, let me change it up a little bit. And I sent him the sketch, and he said, I like his mustache. And I was like, okay, I guess that's fine, so we'll go with it. So I just thought that would be a nice little thing to add in.
But he has really big biceps, Michaela. I mean, Ukrainian children, if they recognize me, are going to say, what happened to your arms? Here's this next picture. Explain it to us.
Yes, so this one originally was 2 separate images, but through the editing process, one of the editors actually had the idea to combine them into one and just elongate it, and have that be more of like a centerfold image, to communicate really how long and arduous of a journey these kids had to safety.
And here's your final image.
That one is my favorite, just because I really wanted to communicate like the desperation of reunification with the family at the end of the story.
I don't know if you noticed this. I mean, I didn't text you about it last night, but I noticed that you captured the Ukrainian flag in reverse.
Oops.
That's great. No, that's beautiful. Like,
oh, okay.
Like you can see it in the setting, right? Like, see the Ukrainian flag on the boat, but the sun, the sky, and the ocean has the same yellow and blue colors that Ukrainian children would be familiar with.
At first I thought you meant I did the
No,
flag
no,
upside down.
you didn't get the flag upside down. And I think it's just such a beautiful image that to a Ukrainian refugee kid says, wow, these are our colors. This is what we're about. So this is part of the prayer process. You didn't even know you were doing it, and God knew you were doing it.
Okay, so Phil, share with the body sort of what's next and what their part can be.
Sure. So again, you guys have played such a vital role from the beginning and so many moving parts. But here it is in closing. We took this order without funds being raised for it. It's approximately $22,000. About a third of that has been raised already. So that's the financial amount. But please understand, from my perspective, this is $1 a book, 90 cents to $1 a book for a refugee child to have a 50-page color book in their hands that presents the gospel. Okay? And they don't have anything, right? That's the other part of this. So you have this opportunity to participate. 25,000 copies, I think, is only the first printing. So if you give, it continues to go to push out books into other areas outside of Poland. 5,000 of these will actually go into Ukraine. 20,000 will be distributed to refugee children in Poland. And there's opportunity to continue to distribute. I just think it's a much bigger project than anticipated. And finally, you prayed on April 17th, and a lot happened. It is in the hands of a translator that is trying to do her work by Wednesday of this week. God's a great God. He can make that happen. And then it's going to go to layout, and then it's going to be May 14th, sent to the German publisher who will get it to Poland. So there's a lot of moving pieces. Even though Michaela finished her part last night, and even though I finished mine a few days ago, there's still moving pieces that need prayer. If you wish to participate in the giving, the best way to do that is to go out to the Biblical Strategies webpage. You'll see a donate button. All of those gifts are through a nonprofit, so they're tax deductible. But if you would wish to give, that's the place or the way to give, or make a check out and just drop it by the church here.
Great, great. So I want to bring it full.